Hello, and welcome back to Now We're Really Talking, the podcast where we explore real mental health journeys through open and honest conversation. In today's episode, I'm joined by Leigh Johnstone, also known as a beardy gardener. Leigh has done so much in the mental health space, and his journey spans theatre, horticulture, and now social media. In this conversation, Leigh shares his story of growing up with an alcoholic parent, the long-term impact of childhood trauma, and how creativity, performance, and later gardening became vital tools in his healing. We talk about resilience, physical and mental health, and the powerful role that the arts and nature can play in well-being and prevention. Before we begin, a quick content warning. This episode includes discussion of childhood trauma, addiction, grief, and mental health struggles. Please take care while listening. Feel free to pause or step away if you need to. If anything in this episode brings up difficult feelings for you, support is always available. In the UK, you can contact Samaritans for free on 116 123 or text SHOUT to 85258 to speak to a trained volunteer. If you're outside the UK, you can find local helplines at findahelpline.com. You can also reach out to somebody you trust or a healthcare professional. With that said, let's get into the episode. So, hello Leigh, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Paddy. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. It was probably touch on it a bit more later, but the weather this morning was pretty grim. The sun seems to be shining a bit better now.
Well, it's not.
Which
It's
always
not
makes me feel
here.
better.
I don't know where you are in the country. Where are you in the country?
I'm in the Midlands.
So I'm down south, and it's grey. It's grey and raining.
Really?
Yeah, but
Really? Yeah.
it's what do we expect? What do we expect?
That's British weather, isn't it? But that's the joys. But I think we've got so much to talk about. There's a lot of things that I'm really interested in, given that I relate to a lot of what you do with gardening and drama, and you're so open about mental health. But I guess start off with, when did you first come across mental health? When did you first realise it was a thing?
Oh, great question. Formally, in terms of someone sort of labelling my head or my thoughts and feelings as mental health, probably not until university. I think I was, I understood that there were things going on in my mind as a child, and anger and anxiousness and worries and stuff. But in terms of maybe understanding that there was a thing called mental health, that probably wasn't until probably wasn't until university. So when I was around sort of 19, 20, I would say. It's interesting, actually. I've never been asked that, so it's an interesting thought, that in terms of when did that moment happen. But yeah, I think it's as I was starting to talk to other people, my peers, people that were sort of going through similar things. We would, as you do it, when you go to university, you mix with a different group of people than your childhood friends. But for me, that was quite powerful, and I think it was probably at that point when we started to started to open up a bit more.
I think you're right. I think it's interesting to look back, because a lot of people, once you realise what that mental health is a thing, you can look back and it works as an explanation of kind of what's gone on.
Oh, and also, I mean, now I think we are. I think there's still a lot more work to do, but now the term is used far more often, even than it was 5 years ago. So, and especially when I was at university, what was that? 16 years ago now. Maybe potentially again, that term wasn't as well used as it is now as well, maybe, and that plays into it potentially.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's a normalization now. It's becoming more and more normalized, isn't it? And would you say that after, coming across mental health, would you say that you can look back at your childhood and point to times when you had struggled with your mental health?
Oh yeah. So I call it escape to university, because that's what it was for me. So I grew up in Kent. So my mental health journey starts really when my mum started drinking when I was about 10. So I understand, but back then, I know now that was my childhood trauma, and all sorts of things going on. Back then, my feelings were anger, and they were scared, and I was sad, and I was anxious, and I was worried, and it all stems from that part of my life. But now, through moving away to university, and doing theatre gave me an opportunity to sort of take myself out of that situation. And I was able to look at what was going on at home because mum was still drinking when I was at university. But I was physically distanced from that, and I could also switch off. I could not answer the phone. I could not, and often sometimes I wouldn't go back for Easter and things like that, just because I needed my own space and my own time, and I could make that decision. Whereas if I was still back in Kent in that family situation, it wouldn't have been as easy. Um, so yeah, I certainly started. And then at university, I did a module in my theatre degree called Women, Theatre and Autobiography. So it was looking at plays, looking at plays that women had created about themselves and about their experiences. And it first got me interested in the term lived experience and what lived experience of poor mental health looks like. And then I did a piece about my own experience of being at home with mum, and that was the moment where I really understood that actually I'd been affected by something quite traumatic called trauma, childhood trauma, PTSD, or whatever you want to label it, that I needed to process in some way. And then the period then on has been, and I still am on that journey of discovery. Um, yeah,
And
yeah.
as a child, how that kind of manifested? Did you were you carrying that around?
Yeah, so I used to write a diary, and actually the diary formed part of uh, a show I did about this whole thing, this whole part of my life. So it was interesting to read back actually and look at what I'd wrote. It manifests. So I lost my hair quite young. I was stress-induced alopecia, I think, is what the physical symptom was there. Lots of eczema, all that. So there's lots, and I still now suffer from extreme, actually, I say at times, physical symptoms when I'm stressed. And I'm really interested actually in the link between our poor mental health and how it manifests itself in the body, actually physically. There's something really interesting there. But yeah, so I had lots of physical symptoms like that. I was quite outgoing though, so I used theatre and to develop my confidence and sort of. But what that was doing was masking the troubles that were going on at home. So I would be the class clown. I would, make everyone laugh. I would perform my way out of situations. Um, to deal with it. I think I spent a lot of time upstairs in my room just crying. I remember a lot of crying when I was going through that. I remember a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, a lot of confusion. Didn't really understand why I couldn't change how mum was actually. Um, and that was quite a big learning curve for me, accepting that actually mum's decision was her decision. Because I used to get blamed all the time. Mum used to blame me for her drinking as part of the addiction process. Everyone else around her was blamed but herself. So I would get it in the neck because I was the only one there. Mum and dad had got a divorce, and I had two young sisters that were living with my dad because they were too young to be at home with mum. I had made the decision because I was old enough to stay with mum. Whether or not that's a good or a bad thing, I still decide, debate in my head. But yeah, so I was constantly blaming myself for mum's drinking, and I never wanted to talk to anyone formally about it because I felt like that they would take her away from me. I felt like that she'd be put into care, I'd be put into care, or so there was a fear there from the establishment, maybe, if you will, a lack of understanding about what that might mean. But I was a child, so why would I understand? Um, but yeah, so a lot of fear, a hell of a lot of fear, that again manifests itself continually in my adult life. A sort of sense of wariness now. I'm not very good at trusting people. I always fear the worst. Actually, I still always fear the worst, and it's part of that resilience. It's part of that armor I think I had to put on as a child. So um, yeah, so there's, I mean, other things might come to mind, but they're the main things probably is how I remember it being, and actually what that still looks like in me and in my head and in my body now.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think you're so right with that link between mental health and physical health, and
Mm,
something that can be looked a lot more in detail with physical health and mental health impacting physical health, and physical health also impacting mental health, and how that carries on throughout your life, and the long term impact. So you got to the university and you kind of started to learn about mental health and kind of reflect and want, you had that distance. What was the first step towards the road to accepting what had happened and kind of healing, I guess?
So it was the theatre module in year 2 of my university course, where I started just to explore. I performed some of my diary extracts, I think. So I read out some of my diaries that I'd wrote as a child, formed them with the supervision of my lecturer, and that then turned into us. So I formed my theatre company, the charity I still run, when I was in the second year at university. So 2010, I formed that company. And one of our first shows we did was called Rum in the Gravy Boat, which was about mum and me. I played myself, and my colleague played my mum. And that was probably the first time I had really interrogated what had happened to me as a child. I always refused counselling. I only did counselling probably in the last 5 years. It's because I felt, for me, as a kid, especially, I thought that they were waiting for me to say something that they wanted to hear. I had to tell them something that they needed from me, and I didn't feel that was empowering, I suppose, or what I wanted to do. I think they were trying to trick me or catch me out, so I never wanted counselling. And for me, the theatre process enabled me to be in control of the narrative, in control of my own story, to pick and choose what bits I would test today. So, we spent several months in the rehearsal space, and one day it might be that I'd come in with an extract of diary from a really particularly awful day, and I'd start to read a bit of it, and then I'd be like, I can't read anymore. It's fine, that's okay. We'll come back to that tomorrow, or we'll put a bit of music over the top, and we'll see if you can, instead of reading it out, can you physicalize that in your body? Yeah. So it was giving me a different language to expressing some of that trauma that I'd felt, and that process was just really cathartic, actually. And the whole the whole part of putting on that play was, for me, the first step to my on my journey of better well-being, because we did the show. At the end of the show, I stood up in front of the audience and said, "Hello, my name's Leigh, and my mum's an alcoholic." And I'd never said that to anyone. I always hid it. I thought it was embarrassing, but I did it on stage. I was performing it to people. It felt safe, though. The stage was my safety net. And then mum and dad came to watch it, which for me was scary, terrifying, highly exposing, but quite powerful, because mum and dad sat next to each other for the first time in years. They obviously divorced each other. They sat next to each other. They watched the show. Obviously very traumatic for my mum and my dad. But they actually came up to me at the end and said, "We didn't realise it had affected you like that, Leigh." And then that play was then the starting point for healing to go on within the family as well. So, and that's why I sort of straddle my time now between the arts and horticulture. But that's why I do the work I do in the arts, because I understand deep down the power that the arts can have on well-being, because it helped me in my journey. So and then from there is a building block. Then I felt more comfortable in just saying, "Oh yeah, my mum's an alcoholic, recovering alcoholic," in conversations, and because people would see the show and they'd feel they'd be empathetic and compassionate, and I felt safe about that. And yeah, so it was a long process. That was 2016 when that show went out. But yeah, but I would not be here telling you this today if it wasn't for that show.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think the way that drama and theatre can have that impact on not just you but your family as well, and brought your parents together to sit and watch and actually to show the impact it had on you. And because you'd had these experiences with your mum, and you'd been blamed, and obviously it was traumatic, did you carry around resentment for that and anger?
Yes, to start with, a lot. But then, as the company that I'd created and the work we were doing was working with other people with poor mental health, and sometimes with people with addiction. So I went and I think it was during university. I wrote an essay around a company called Outside Edge that were up in London, who are still going. Actually, they do brilliant work with adults with substance misuse problems. And it's a theatre group for them. They put on plays, and it's about building confidence and stuff. So I went and volunteered with them, and I started to then surround myself with people who had also been through addiction. And then obviously you start to understand mum's point of view, what mum was going through, Mum then starts to talk to me about what it was that triggered her and started making her drink. And I understood then from Mum's point of view. And because I'd been on that journey myself and I was again removed from it physically as well as mentally, I started to understand uh, that it wasn't Mum's fault at all. There were circumstances out of her control. Drinking was the coping strategy for her own poor mental health, and I've gone on a journey there as well, and I don't resent her or blame her for any of that anymore. But very much did during the situation, and probably for several years after it. But no, not anymore, which is a great thing.
Yeah, it is, and it is difficult when you're growing up, isn't it? And you can't. It's very difficult to understand and empathize with people when you haven't, been in those situations and been surrounded by other people like that. And once you begin to um, learn more, then that kind of greater understanding can come.
But I think that also comes from, that's why I'm also passionate about improving young people's mental health, because, as a young person, you still have, your life ahead of you, but there's a world of learning and relationship building and trust building. And, there are, you don't know everything and you're trying to explore who you are. And, during that period when Mum was drinking, I was trying to understand who I was as well. And that actually is a lot of my worries and anger and anxieties around that time came from very much what happens when you're a teenage boy is like, I need to find a girlfriend. I need to, I need to be. I felt I needed someone to almost share that with, but also that someone that loved me. And I was obsessed with the idea around, getting a girlfriend and trying to find a girlfriend at school, and my relationship with women has been interesting over the years, and I've actually had some therapy about that in recent years. Um, but I think there's no way on earth I could have been ready to understand Mum's point of view or situation when I was trying to understand who I was first. So that was really important as well.
Yeah, I think that's so true. In a lot of it's such a big time of change, isn't it?
Mm.
And it's difficult being a teenager as it is, trying to fit in with school. And did you enjoy school?
I loved primary school. I talk a lot about my journey to horticulture came from my grandma and my rural primary school, so that was a lovely time. Mum started drinking sort of when I was just gone to year 7, so so that was a rough period. But actually, I quite liked the friends. I liked the school. I quite liked the learning. Actually, sixth form not so much. What I did actually, I went to a bigger sixth form in Canterbury, realized I didn't like that very much, and then went back to the school to finish my A levels. So I don't think I was ready for that change, that dramatic change, and those new experiences, those new, a new place, a new city, a new friendship group. And actually, for me, the best thing was to go back to school where I knew somewhere safe that I enjoyed, and do A levels there. But yeah, I mean, I was head boy at secondary school actually, which was an experience in itself. But that was which was nice, and I was, I loved it. I loved performing, and I loved doing all the plays, and I got to do some amazing like foreign trips and stuff. So yeah, I really, it was sixth form that was challenging.
If we talk about plays and performing, when did that
Mm.
start? That love? Was it because of an escape? But when did you really start to find that?
Well, I did. I remember doing Jack in the Beanstalk at primary school. Um, and I enjoyed that. It was just a thing I did. And then I think I joined the drama club at secondary school in year 7. And the first show we did was Grease. And I think I fell off the stage during one of the songs. But I remember vividly being able to, I sort of fell off the stage and then got back up, and I had hair back then, sort of slicked my hair back and carry on with the dance. And everyone loved it and everyone laughed. And I was like, oh, I quite like this feeling. It's a nice group of people. It's a cool like rehearsal process. I like the feeling of people watching me and me performing to them, making them laugh and them enjoying it. And there was such a buzz about performing on stage that gave me a great positive adrenaline rush. So it was almost from year 7, and then I studied drama, GCSE, A-level degree. So yeah, it was almost from day one, starting at secondary school.
I completely resonate with that. I've just finished my local amateur dramatics pantomime.
Great.
And I absolutely love it. It's such an escape, and it allows me to be this other person. And yeah, I think I feel that exhilaration and adrenaline and having people watch you and
And
laugh and
I
enjoy it.
and I think there's a nice team and ensemble that's created, especially if you get a really good cast. There's a intense rehearsal period. You're with each other, a few times a week potentially for several weeks, and you all gel and you bond to do something productive that's shown, and you get praised for it. And it's just a nice. I mean, I did a lot of work in prisons actually during at university. I did a show in a prison, and it's the same situation. You bring a group of guys together in a prison, you let them just explore who they are with each other for a bit. You get them to do something positive. You put on a show. It makes them feel better. It's all the same natural, um, natural emotions that humans crave. Is that positive reinforcement, confidence, that great self-esteem, making people laugh. It releases all those happy hormones. And I was actually part of the when I was at secondary school. I was lucky enough to get into the National Youth Theatre. So my drama teacher pushed me to audition. So I got into National Youth Theatre probably when I was in about year 9, 10. And that for me was my first taste actually of probably what made it easier for me to go to university. It was my first taste of going away from home. So you got into National Youth Theatre and then you spent 2 weeks in London on one of their courses. They do them all over the country now, but back then it was just London. So you'd spend 2 weeks with professional director, professional assistant in Laban, which is a professional dance studio in Greenwich. You'd stay over at halls. I mean, I was 16, 15, 16. There was a little bit of underage drinking going on, but for me it was just my first sense of an escape and of an amazing experience with a new group of people that loved what I loved. At school you've got your friends, but then you find your tribe, don't you? And I think that's really important. That's what university was like as well. You find people that are really into what you're into. They're into the same books or the same experiences or whatever it is. And I found that going away to London. It was 2 weeks. And I've still got the diary where I am devastated that it's coming to an end. And actually, my wife will tell you, whenever I spend some time away now doing show gardens and things across the country. And again, it's very much you're together with a group of people for 2 or 3 weeks, creating a show garden, putting it on at a flower show, people telling you how amazing things are, and then you break it down. And a couple of years ago, I did that Hampton Court flower show, and I spent 14 days away from my wife and my daughter, and I came back and I was inconsolable. It was like I just sort of lost something. I just lost that high adrenaline rush, and it knocked me for six actually. And now I'm thinking about it, I'm making the link. It goes back to that sense of that ensemble, that sense of being with people that are your tribe, that sense of constant fun, excitement, and engagement. And actually, yeah, it's making me think now of all the moments like that throughout my life so far, and why I felt certain ways about them actually. So yeah, it's interesting.
We literally finished last Saturday, and I have that every year, that kind of emptiness and that feeling of a bit of kind of grief really for the end of that. Because even you might do other shows, you might do other places, but it's never the same. It's never going to be those exact same people and that exact script. And you mentioned earlier about one of the things you do now and something you've done since university is your own theatre company. Can you talk to us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I set up. So it's called Fluid Motion. I set the charity up in 2010 with my fellow student Ali, who's slightly older than me but has a similar experience and story around how the arts helped her mental health and her children. She has 3 children, and we wanted to create. Well, one actually, I wanted to work for myself when I left university, so it was a little bit of sort of lining up a career for me after I'd left. But two, really, most importantly, was to share that joy that I had found in performing and using theatre and acting to support my own well-being, and I wanted other people to experience that. So the company ran across Hampshire for years and years, and then in 2024, in May last year, we made a decision to take on a unit actually in a New Forest, and it sounds very romantic, but it's actually one of the the most sort of urbanised areas of the New Forest, a place called Totton, which is quite deprived and has a lot of issues and challenges. And we've got a shop front in the only shopping precinct in the town, and we've created that creative health hub. That's what we've called it. So we want it to be a place where people can pop in, stop by, drop in and do an art and craft session, and if that's all they do, that's fine. Or they can do the drama club, or they can do an anxiety workshop, or they can have counselling, whatever it is. It's taken us sort of 16 years to get there, but that was my ultimate aim, I think, is having this place that's a bit like a art centre come wellbeing centre come youth club, that is a place where people exist and to have a positive interaction with the arts. It's challenging. Running a charity is challenging. The landscape now is tougher than ever before in terms of trying to raise funds. But yeah, fundamentally, it comes from the lived experience again. So all we talk about is the fact that Ali and I both have lived experience of poor mental health. That is what fuels us. That is why we want to make change. That is why we want to share what we've learned and give that to other people. So we've done all sorts though in our history. We've done bits of Shakespeare, big performance. We used to run a mental health arts festival up in Basingstoke for 5 years. We've done obviously my touring piece, my show about my mum. But really the key to it all has been the wellbeing elements. So yeah, I've done that for 16 years. I am ready for a new change now. So I am on that career change pinnacle. Is that the right word? But yeah, it's been. I hope that we still do help people and discover what we call give people a light bulb moment to understand what the arts can do, how the arts can really essentially be a tool in their arsenal of coping strategies. Really,
Yeah, it sounds amazing, and yeah, you've done such incredible things over the last however many years. Do you think as a society we can use art and drama and crafts more to kind of help those who are struggling or maintain positive well-being?
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, what we are tapping into is the whole idea of prevention. Really, I mean, and we could talk about, we could get political and we could talk about the health system, and you know as well as I do that the health system is not a preventative service. But it needs to be a preventative service if it's to have a future. We need to be helping people before they reach crisis point. But that takes a fundamental mindset and shift, really, which I don't know where we are with that as a country, to be honest. And I think the arts has a powerful role in that. So does horticulture. So do many other things out there. But I think it needs. At the moment, I still feel it's seen as a sort of nice aside. I think there's so many reports and evidence and research around how when you do have a community hub that is just potentially providing someone to chat to alongside some mindful colouring in its simplest sense. If that's invested in long term and that's always a space that's there for someone, all right, it might not, it might take a while to see the benefit, but there will be a benefit there. And I think we have to be viewing things now as we need to be just nurturing healthy people. We don't need to be treating them when it's already bad. I think that's the main point of the work we try and do is to bring people on a journey, young people on a journey right from naught, really, to get them interacting with other people better, to get them moving, movement and dance, physical health, completely, transformative to mental health. They go hand in hand. Active people are more healthier people. And when you're active, your mental health is better. So there's all that, but then there's all, giving young people positive role models, which, social media there's a positive and negatives to social media, but the negative is that social media provides so many negative role models for children and young people. I think we need more spaces and places in the community where young people are given positive role models. And one of the ways is, my drama teacher was a positive role model. My theatre tribe were positive role models. These things have been cut and decimated from our communities over years and years and years. And I think we're seeing the impacts of all that now. So Yeah, the arts. Even just as a, what I call self-care days. We all have a self-care day where we go, do you know what? I just need to do something for me today. You know, putting on a podcast, listening to some music, going to the theatre. It's all part of that self-care package.
Yeah, I agree. And it can get political, but I think that it's beyond politics really, that we need to help young people and look at what we can do to help those who are struggling. And you mentioned horticulture a lot, and obviously a lot of what you do now on kind of social media is around gardening. When did you first discover a love for gardening?
Well, I was always interested. So nature featured very heavily in my primary school life, as I mentioned earlier. So I grew up in Kent, fairly rural Kent. My grandma had a large garden. She used to take me out. We plant stuff, pick stuff, go for walks, build tree houses, all sorts of things. So there was a connection with nature from a very early age. Then during the teenage years, obviously everything that was gone on in my teenage life happened, but also you have other priorities when you're a teenager, and they aren't necessarily gardening, or really, I spent a lot of time outside, but I wasn't interested in growing stuff or plants or flowers and stuff. So there's a whole period of my life that I wasn't doing anything like that. And then basically it re-emerged during COVID. So I bought our house here with my wife just before COVID hit. COVID happened. We had a garden. I had to use that as a space to deal with my own, because basically when COVID hit, my all that stuff that happened as a child, all that stuff I thought was managing, well, I was managing well, came back again. So the isolation that was forced upon us during COVID, that sense of nothing going on. I always need the next thing. I need the next challenge. I need that. I can't sit in what I call no man's land. I get anxious and I need to do something. So COVID for me was a real struggle. Used the garden outside as a sort of creative patch of land to talk about what I was going to do with it on social media. I was exploring and understanding what to grow with an online community. Then I brought in the theatre side of my background into creating interesting social media content around the garden, and suddenly that got noticed and more popular. And then I was like, do you know what? I quite like this. I like this learning about gardening. I like gardening. I like talking about mental health. And it was never a career choice. It sort of evolved as I, got other experiences and people asked me to do stuff. And so it's been a evolving career move rather than I'm going to be a gardener or a garden designer. But actually, for really essentially it's just taking a different genre. It's still mental health focused. It's just not arts and mental health now. It's horticulture and mental health. It's still achieving the same thing for me, helping people. And when we're thinking about actually designing gardens or landscapes, there is a creative theatrical element to that, especially if you're doing a show garden, because that is a stage set. A show garden is a stage, really. It's a moment in time of a landscape. And all the stuff you would do when creating a theatre show, thinking about what we call the semiotics of the performance, texture, lighting, colour, framing, all of that is applicable to garden design as well. First got interested, young kid, left me. COVID really, was the point that I leaned on it because I needed it.
Yeah, I resonate with the COVID. I know when I had nothing going on, my mental health was probably the worst it's ever been. And I've seen, I think, a quote from you where you said that gardening quite literally saved your life. Was that because of that? It was that escape and something to focus on.
Yeah. I don't know, but because also my grandma, who had got me interested in gardening, obviously the only grandma, my mum's mum, I'd never met, so it was the only grandma I had. She died of COVID during that period, so I had that grief to deal with, alongside dealing with the isolation and the trauma, all that sort of stuff, all that poor mental health emerging again. Yeah, I don't know what I would have done without that outlet. I remember there were days I just wouldn't get out of bed during the COVID. There was nothing to get out of bed for. But the garden is like, okay, I'm gonna try and see if I can find some more compost online today, or I'm gonna go out and plant that bulb. I remember being really obsessed with what was going to sprout up in the garden, and I don't do it now. And I think sometimes we get wrapped back up again in that modern busy world. COVID was good in some senses because it slowed us down. we got to understand what really mattered in life. And I remember there's a period where I was going out every single morning and just looking at the next inch of soil that emerged from the bulb that was coming up, whatever. And that was just giving me something to take my mind off stuff. So it was really a lifesaver for me. It was a positive thing that took my mind off stuff.
Yeah, and I think similarly, you've talked about those like little wins and
Mm.
actually just getting out and doing. I think one of them like moving some like stones, like 5 stones, and I think that's applicable to kind of all of life, really. But that actual reconnection and grounding with nature, there's something special about it. And what are the specific virtues of gardening for your mental health?
So for me, the most powerful is it connects me with something bigger than myself, and that sounds a bit airy fairy and a bit spiritual. I mean, I'm not. It's interesting. I never really thought of myself. I'm not religious. I never really thought of myself as spiritual. But actually, the more I am on this journey of really understanding the role nature plays in our world and connecting with the seasons and things, the more I think I am spiritual, and whatever that means, though, because that means lots of things to different people. But going back to something bigger than me, the fact that the seasons were still happening, or the sun still comes up, the sun still sets. That life is whatever's going on in my life. There's something bigger out there. It's like when you look up at the stars. It puts your world into perspective, and actually, for me, that was a positive thing. I was part of just the world was still turning, no matter how bad it was for you in your head. um in this And then the more I think that, the more I then appreciate a lovely, chilly morning when the sun's coming up and it's a bit hazy and you've got a lovely landscape in front, and then you start to really appreciate those small things actually in life, and the small natural things that have always been there in our world. And then for me, it's about this, just being in touch with the seasons and connecting really fundamentally back to our evolutionary roots. We are not made to sit in artificial light. We go to bed really when the sun sets, and then we wait, and then we need to go back to those sort of natural rhythms. And I think that's partly why there's high levels of depression and poor mental health, anxiety. I think we're just, there's this pressure, there's this artificial light. We're not, a lot of people, I certainly suffer from seasonal affective disorder, the light levels, the dark nights, and we want to hunker down in the winter, don't we? And that's a connection to us and nature. And I think, wildlife understanding, well, I was feeding the birds, and I've got 3 chickens now, and people have this with pets. They can't talk back to you. You can talk to them and they listen, and you think they understand. And I think it's the same when you feed the birds. You have maybe the same robin that comes down, or just shares that space with you in that moment. And I think that's really, really wonderful. Plants as well. Plants make you happy. Plants make you smile. Color. The human eye sees more shades of green than any other color. So we are, again, naturally wired to appreciate and to engage with greenery, and be surrounded by that makes us feel good. It's part of why we bring Christmas trees into our house during the winter, because we're bringing the outside in. We're being reminded of the natural world. And how that, what that's like on our well-being. So while lots of people at the moment, house plants are a big thing at the moment. People having lots of house plants for their well-being, and understanding how that helps them, helps air quality, all that sort of stuff. And I also just like being in nice spaces. So and whenever I design a garden, talk about gardening, it's around, gardening can touch all of what, the 5 steps to well-being, which I talk about a lot in my work. You're looking at, the garden can give to others. It can give you, new learning. You can connect with other people there. It can make you physically active. You can learn something new. You can take a moment to notice. So the garden does all that for you. And people always say to me, well, where should I start? I'm trying to garden for my well-being. Where should I start? It's like, well, it's not for me to tell you where to start. It's what you want the garden to do for you. It's what you want from your outdoor space. If you just like going for a walk, maybe you just need a place to walk around, or to sit, or to have a cup of tea. It's not necessarily about planting. It's more about your connection to outside.
Yeah. I think, and you mentioned earlier around that kind of, it's not natural to be inside. And I was reading a book, and, it said that the foragers thousands of years ago were some of the happiest people because they were living these lives, and they were acting the way that humans were evolved to be. And yeah, I think if we can get a bit more of that into all of our lives.
And I think, I think it's sometimes me and my wife do a thing where of an evening we won't put on any lights and we'll just use candlelight, and it just puts you in a completely different mood. And I don't know, it just there's a sort of instinctive, connection with fire and safety and warmth. There are shadows, it feels cozy. I don't know, and there's something about going to bed when trying to not force yourself to sort of, have a light on your phone or the screen, and just those couple of those small things throughout the year can actually just shift your mindset a bit and just refocus you and think about a different priority. But yeah, I mean, I've got grand visions of like being some sort of like medieval apothecary that's wandering around the fields, with a big hood and creating herbal medicines and going to bed when the sun sets and things. I think part of me wants to go back to that sort of back to the ancestors a bit. But yeah. So I think there's lots of people that talk about the perils of modern life. We're in it though, and we have to sort of do what's right for us and what's best for us, and get that balance. Because I still like to eat some fried chicken whilst gaming, which,
Yeah,
which the ancestors weren't doing. So
no, no, that's very true. And yeah, me too. Uh, as you mentioned, one of the things of social media is the negative influences, and one thing that you're really authentic and being very open around your mental health. Why is it important for you to do that?
well, one, because I mean, that's who I am, I suppose, and that's I can just offer I can be authentic because I've been on a journey, and I don't have to hide anything anymore. And that takes time, and that takes a process, and I feel like, actually, I always say that I feel like I'm in a privileged position because I've been on a journey of my own self-discovery, if you want to call it that. I've been through a process of dealing with my trauma and having counselling and doing the show, and people understanding my journey. That um, I feel like I have to try and share that with people, because it doesn't matter to me if I do. I feel I don't have to hide anything. I can tell people exactly how I feel, and if that helps someone, if someone hears that and is helped by that, then I feel great. So that's one thing. I think too, it's just nice. Yeah, social media is it's a place we can edit. It's a place where we can share versions of ourselves that maybe aren't us. And we've all fallen victim of that. I've certainly fallen victim of that before. But I think people connect with other humans when they can sense that it is truthful and authentic, and there's a story that they resonate with. And I think when we're talking about mental health, I think we need to be honest and talk about the good and the bad, and people can make up their own minds what they want to understand, take from it, learn. I'm very conscious. I've always been very conscious. It doesn't happen so much these days. During COVID, it happened a lot. I'd get lots of other men mainly messaging me saying, thank you for that, needed that today, or it was interesting to hear that point of view. Can you tell me how to blur? Be very, very open with them and say, I'm not a trained professional, I'm not a counsellor, I can't give clinical advice, but this is what I did or whatever. So I'm always very conscious of that as well, especially when you have an audience and you're talking about mental health, and especially doing the work I do, and the work around safeguarding children, young people in that space as well. So I'm very conscious of making sure that you aren't telling people how to manage their, you're suggesting, you're not giving opinion.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? And I think, yeah, what you do is so great, especially when there are these, I think the positive role models and the positive people. There's always a fight against the more kind of negative and harmful um, influences out there. Um, but yeah, it's so necessary. And kind of coming to the end, we could talk a long time about gardening and drama, but I could talk all day. But the one question I like to ask kind of all the guests is, if you give yourself advice, maybe when you're at your lowest, what would you say to that person?
I would say, give yourself, accept that this will happen. You'll feel like this. It's not a bad part of you. give yourself time to go through the process of feeling like this, to beat yourself up for feeling like this. Because that's almost been one of the biggest learning journeys for me, is that understanding now that there will be days where I feel low. And I think maybe, several years ago, I thought, well, actually, I could probably manage it so I never feel low again. And that, yeah. So it's accepting that you will have bad days, having that sort of. I also, someone told me off for this the other day, but I talked about myself being very selfish. I'm privileged to be able to do that in my job as well. I can take an afternoon and just lie in bed or watch or whatever, or read a book or whatever, as a reset, as a bit of self-care for me. So that's a very privileged position to be in, but that comes with years of almost carving those moments out of my day to make sure that if I do need to recover, I can do it quicker than I have done in the past. So I would say understand that you'll have bad days, and that is okay. Go easy on yourself, and have you think about what your moments of self-care are like, and don't feel it's selfish to have those opportunities and moments.
I love that, and I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with, and something that a lot of people can take on board, especially myself. But yeah, that's wonderful advice, and yeah, it's been brilliant to chat for an hour, and I've learned so much about gardening and learned kind of all sorts of things. And yeah, I'm really grateful for you being so open and honest, and for your time. Do you want to shout out the accounts or anything?
Well, I just want to say thank you, Paddy, for having me on here, and it's great what you're doing, and I wish you all the success in the rest of this. It's great that you're doing this and having these conversations. So thank you for having me on. No, if anyone wants to find out more, I mean, I'm the beardy gardener professionally. So beardy gardener on my website and on social as well. If you want to check out the charity, it's Fluid Motion Theatre.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you, Leigh, for that. I really appreciate it, and thank you everybody for listening. I hope you found the episode insightful, and thank you for your continued support, and I'll catch you in the next one. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Now We're Really Talking. If anything we've talked about today has brought up things for you, remember, you're not alone. There's resources in the podcast description. If this conversation resonated, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, take care of yourself, don't stop talking, and keep the conversation going.